Thanks, President. Listening to the cheerleading in here, safe and secure, thousands of miles away from the front lines, I think it would be a useful exercise for us to remind ourselves about what ordinary Ukrainians are experiencing. The Economist reports of forced recruitment across the country. Draftees with no experience or training are being sent to the front in what a UK minister calls First World War levels of attrition. Casualty figures are secret, but we know they're estimates of about 120,000. Battalion commanders tell the Washington Post of recruits fleeing positions en masse. Politico reports a crackdown on deserters. These are human beings, and there is a shameful lack of empathy for ordinary people in the war rhetoric in here. The debate is about keeping the weapons flowing to keep the war going. Ukraine is burning through a generation of men, sons, husbands, brothers who can never be replaced. This cannot go on indefinitely. And ye sickening war generals who sit in here and will these men to our deaths, you make me sick. We need peace, we need dialogue, however unpleasant that may be. Month after month, people come in here and shout glory to Ukraine. The walls and the buildings are decked with flags and slogans, stand with Ukraine. But what does that mean? What does it mean for the thousands of young male Ukrainian university students who are banned from travelling abroad to study? Since last September, although enrolled in foreign colleges, they are forbidden from leaving their country, losing places, scholarships, grants, in flagrant breach of Article 26 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And be clear, these men are not fleeing the war. They are exempt from military service. Proud Ukrainians, they want to play a part in redeveloping their country and rebuilding it after their education. Yet they are being blocked by Ukraine's Minister for Science and Education, who's failed to amend the law while issuing exit letters for the sons of the connected and the privileged. They're being interned by Zelensky, who, despite receiving a petition from 25,000 parents and students requiring him to act, has done nothing. And neither have the so-called friends of Ukraine in the EU government. Surely standing with Ukraine, if it's to mean anything, means standing with the citizens and against corruption. Grazie, Presidente. So, the EU solution to the war in Ukraine is more war. Pile in the weapons, splurge on militarism, threaten to engage in all-out economic and financial war against Russia. So the same things you were doing already and expecting a different result. The true definition of madness. How is not selling Kerrygold butter to Russia going to save any Ukrainian lives? How is buying filthy fracked US gas going to stop the war? They won't, of course, because nowhere have sanctions ever succeeded in ending a military assault or achieving regime change. But what they have done is unleash economic devastation, this time round which will be paid for by the people of Russia, including those out protesting against the war, and increasingly being paid for by the citizens of Europe, facing massive energy price hikes, inflation and a catastrophic decline in their living standards. Talk about shooting ourselves in the foot. And of course this moral outrage at Russia's illegal war, which has sparked this lunacy, is in sharp contrast to the lack of any such scruples in terms of the illegal US wars in Iraq or Afghanistan, which we not only didn't condemn, but we actually joined in and continue to do business with them all the way. No such scruples about Saudi Arabia's genocide in Yemen. And even as the victims of those conflicts in the last few weeks meet to desperately seek financial pledges for their humanitarian crisis, they're being left short by billions, while we're happy to spend billions prolonging the war in Ukraine. Makes me absolutely sick. 7 weeks ago, Germany's Chancellor Scholz correctly said, peace in Europe cannot be won against Russia. But that's exactly what we're doing. Yes, Russia bears responsibility for this conflict. Of course they do. But we cannot ignore the role of NATO, and the EU, instead of promoting peace and acting in the interests of the people of Europe, the Ukrainians, the EU citizens and yes, the Russian citizens too, has become a tool of NATO and the military-industrial complex. What is needed is an end to the conflict, an end to militarism, a ceasefire and a negotiated settlement. We should restore our role as a diplomatic one of promoting peace. Anything else makes us complicit.
Okay, grazie, grazie onorevole.
Thank you very much. We have a blue card. It's Mr. Jambaski who would like to ask you a question.
Уважаема колега Дели.
Dear colleague, Madam Daly.
I have a question. Can you take this question, please? Blue card. Okay. Уважаема колега Дели.
Dear Madam Daly, do I understand you correctly that you support the lack of sanctions against an aggressor committing war crimes? Do I understand you correctly that your idea how to save Ukrainian children is not to provide the arms to protect them? Do I understand you correctly that you justify one war crime referring to other war crimes? If this is the case, this is shameful. We are not a NATO tool. We are NATO, and we need to defend each and every Ukrainian citizen. Thank you.
Onorevole Daly, ha facoltà di replicare.
Thanks, colleague. I would love colleague Jambaski to tell me any circumstance in which NATO has played a productive role or delivered peace anywhere. History has taught us that sanctions do not end military conflicts. They do not bring peace. They make the people suffer, not the oligarchs, the people of Russia, the people of Europe. And they're not going to help save lives, because the more arms you pump into Ukraine, the more the war will be prolonged, the more Ukrainians will die. And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
Grazie.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm afraid, Mrs. Daly, we've given you the opportunity to reply. So let us try and stay calm so that we can continue the debate. Please let us show respect all the opinions.
Thanks, President. We have just passed the 20th anniversary of the Iraq War, a war where over 1 million people died, where people still grapple with the after effects of the use of depleted uranium, where nobody has been held to account, for a country torn apart and a region plunged into chaos. And we have a responsibility to look back and ask, how did it all happen? Well, it happened because the people in power told us over and over things they knew were not true. It happened because a compliant media failed to ask the questions and parroted those lies day after day, beating the drum for a war of aggression dressed up as a battle of democracy against authoritarianism. So now, as another country is torn apart, another region turned into chaos, at this uniquely dangerous phase in world history, we see the same people again, baying for blood, not their own of course, seizing the moral high ground, condemning peace as appeasement, bellowing that the only option is escalation. Well, you really have to ask yourself the question, why in God's name would we believe these liars now? We need peace and we need it now. Grazie, Presidente. Trump and Brexit should have been a wake-up call for neoliberals. But rather than accept their own responsibility and make amends, they chose to pretend that they hadn't really lost. They found a foreign scapegoat, ramped up the blame game, and so the myth of Russian interference was born. Does Russia meddle? Of course it does. But the Kremlin didn't swing elections in 2016. That is a paranoid conspiracy theory and always has been. Every investigation, the Mueller report, the UK ICO report, the Durham report showed the opposite. If Russia meddled, it had no effect. Inconsequential, it is not an existential threat to our democracy. But the big lie is too useful to let go. Russian interference is now the go-to slur for anything or anyone who disagrees. The anti-war movement, Kremlin stooges. Catalan independence, Putin puppets. Journalists, climate actions, trade unions, Russian agents. Every slander more cynical than the last. This is a sign of a deeply unhealthy political culture. We warned at the beginning that this would end in tears. Now we've NGOs in uproar over the Foreign Agents Law, the Polish government accusing the opposition of Russian collusion. I stand by our minority report. This report is a travesty to an open society. Some of its provisions likely breach EU fundamental rights law. If introduced, it will be abused. We need to put a stop to this madness now. Sorry, President, I am sorry, but the colleague here has just asked me how much money I receive from Putin, which I find highly unacceptable and outrageous, and I'd like that remark withdrawn. It's implying bribery and corruption, which clearly I have never been party to. So could you please clarify your mark and withdraw it?
This is a question you answer.
You asked me how much money I got from Putin. Zero. What do you think? It's an outrageous violation and undermining of a legitimate point of view. You're as authoritarian as your reactionary friends you give out about. You're a disgrace.
Excuse me.
You're a disgrace. You're just as bad as them.
Colleague Daly, here plays the music. Yeah. I want to clearly express that the question, how many money do you get, is a clear insinuation that there is money which is paid. So, colleague, I call you to the order, and I do not intend to discuss on that.